Evolution teacher before grand jury in Dayton Monday. Little town expects big crowd at trial. This was just part of a headline that was found in the Washington Post on May 24th, 1925. The article continues on that the trial will start the revolution of the wheel that is expected eventually to decide whether evolution is a theory, a science, or both in Tennessee. In my opinion, there is no greater example of the fundamentalist-modernist controversy than that of the Scopes monkey trial of 1925. To give a little background on the trial, starting around the early 1920s, several states, including Tennessee, passed legislation that basically made the teaching of evolution illegal. In Tennessee, this anti-evolution law was called the Butler Act. And it was also around this time that there was this new organization that was kind of struggling to find itself. And it was called the American Civil Liberties Union. Today we know it as the ACLU. Essentially, the leader of the ACLU wanted to really get it out there and make a name for it. And he kind of saw these anti-evolution laws as a way to get their name out there. So essentially, they wanted to prove these anti-evolution laws were unenforceable, or even to try to get them overturned and thrown out. Since Tennessee was the first state to pass such a law, this is why the ACLU set their sights on Tennessee. So what happened was the ACLU placed ads in newspapers across Tennessee, and this ad read, "We are looking for a Tennessee teacher who is willing to accept our services in testing this law in the courts. Our lawyers think a friendly test case can be arranged without costing a teacher his or her job. All we need is a willing client." This willing client happened to be a man named John T. Scopes. Scopes was basically talked into working with the ACLU by a mine operator by the name of George Rapelier. Essentially, Dayton and the surrounding areas were going through an economically hard time, and he saw this as a way of getting press and fame for this little town, and that's why he talked Scopes into doing it. Now, Scopes actually truly didn't have a science background, and he really and truly was just acting as a substitute biology teacher during this. And an article from the New York Times states that Professor Scopes denied any pretensions to scientific knowledge or that he had ever professed to teach any science. In fact, Scopes never taught evolution. His crime was that the books that he used in the class mentioned evolution, and it was during a conversation at a local drugstore with some of the good old boys of the town that basically fueled the fire for the trial, and that basically ended up with him getting arrested. So after this conversation Scopes had, he was arrested and eventually released on a $1,000 bond. And right around this time, the famous Christian and Creationist William Jennings Bryan volunteered to step up and prosecute Scopes. And then the ACLU stepped in and asked the famous criminal attorney and agnostic Clarence Darrow to defend Scopes. Darrow normally charged a really high fee, and he waived it for this trial because his main focus, as he wrote in his autobiography, it was "My object and my only object was to focus the attention of the country on the program of Mr. Bryan and other fundamentalists in America." So essentially setting the stage for a battle between the fundamentalist Christians and the modernists who believed in evolution. And it was kind of pegged as the trial of the century. One that pitted creation-leaning fundamentalist against evolution-leaning modernist against each other. And really throughout the trial, which only lasted 8 days, the question became, should evolution be taught in schools? Clarence Darrow had hoped that he could show that evolution was a logical and truthful explanation. He wanted to get the law overturned. And throughout the process, his science was actually faulty. He presented embryonic development and not actual evolution. He put Jennings Bryan on the stand and did have him admit that he didn't necessarily believe in a 24-hour cycle, but in the end, Darrow asked for Scopes to be found guilty, and so Scopes was found guilty. He was fined $100, and in 1967 the Butler Act was actually repealed. People would like to say this was a victory for modernists, but really the science behind it was faulty. So it really was a religious victory and a great controversy of the age. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye.